Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you're tuning in, chances are you're what we'd call an advanced language learner. You've wrestled with the subjunctive, maybe you've nailed those tricky conditional clauses.
Right.
You might even have, say, a C1 certificate framed on your wall. You can write that perfect email, technically flawless, you feel like you've reached the peak, linguistically speaking. But here's the thing, the sort of secret truth. There's this other step, a final frontier maybe, that's more about, well, behavior. It's something no test can really measure. It's that moment you realize, even with really good grammar, you're still kind of being treated like, I don't know, a guest. Or maybe like a permanent student in the conversation.
That's exactly that invisible line, that boundary.
Yeah.
That's what we want to dig into today. Our mission really isn't about piling on more vocabulary or complex syntax.
Right, you're past that stage.
You're past that. We're diving deep into this, well, profound social and psychological shift you need to make. Moving from being the learner, the one everyone cuts some slack.
Yeah, they make allowances.
Allowances, exactly. To becoming a true peer. And a peer is someone where the language itself, the English in this case, just becomes transparent, invisible almost.
So the focus shifts completely.
Completely. It's not on how you're speaking anymore. It's purely on what you're bringing to the table. Your ideas, your wit, your personality, your sense of humor, all of that.
And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because sometimes having that high-level linguistic skill can feel like, well, like a gilded cage.
That's a great way to put it.
You might be C1, even C2 on paper, but if the way people talk to you still feels like teacher-student or like a really polite host talking to a visitor, then you haven't really claimed your spot, have you? You haven't pulled up your own share. We need like a practical guide for this, a playbook, because it doesn't just happen by itself.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It takes conscious effort. You have to actively work to change that dynamic.
Changing how they see you and maybe how you see yourself, too.
Both. Definitely both. It's about shifting perceptions all around.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's define what we're aiming for. What does a real peer conversation actually look like? Because as you said, it's definitely not just about avoiding mistakes.
By far from it. I mean, fundamentally, a peer conversation is all about reciprocity.
Yeah.
Mutual investment.
Meaning both people are pulling their weight?
Exactly. Both people are putting in, roughly equal conversational effort. And honestly, trying to achieve perfect grammar, that can actually be the enemy of becoming a peer.
How so?
Well, if your main goal is perfect English, you're constantly self-monitoring, right? You're still thinking like a learner. But if your goal shifts to making a genuine connection, well, that's aiming for peer status.
Okay, connection. Let's unpack that. The first big element seems to be this idea of exchanging ideas, not just information. When you look at how advanced learners often interact, it can be very factual, safe, closed responses. The goal feels like just transferring information or maybe showing off that you can use the language correctly.
Yeah, think about that classic safe answer trap. Someone asks, how was your weekend?
Right.
The learner reflex is often something like, I went to the park. I watched a movie. The weather was very nice. Correct sentences, sure, perfectly fine.
And dead ends.
Total dead ends. They're closed loops. You've given the other person absolutely zero to work with, except maybe asking another question. You've transferred the facts, but none of the spark. No opening.
So how does a peer handle that differently? How do they open that loop?
They use that factual starting point as a launchpad for something bigger, an opinion, maybe philosophical thought, even sparking a little debate.
Okay, give me that weekend example again, but with a peer mindset.
All right, same scenario. How was your weekend? Peer response. Well, I finally checked out that new immersive art thing downtown. The visuals were stunning, honestly. But it kind of made me wonder.
Okay, here it comes.
It made me wonder if maybe, as a culture, we're getting so hooked on these super produced artificial experiences that we're like losing the knack for finding wonder in just ordinary stuff. What do you think about modern art's obsession with like massive scale?
Wow. Okay, that's a completely different level. You take a simple what did you do and turned it into this shared intellectual thing, a question.
Exactly. You're not just answering, you're opening a topic. You're inviting discussion. And notice, the language might not even be perfect in that peer response.
Right, you might stumble a bit.
You might stumble, you might use like a bit too much, whatever. But it doesn't matter nearly as much because the content, the actual idea you shared, that insightful question, that's suddenly the most important thing. The conversation immediately jumps to a higher level of investment from both sides.
And that level needs to be kept up, right? Which brings us to your metaphor, the flow of conversational tennis.
Yes. This is so key. Conversation between peers, when it's working well, it's like tennis. It's not like playing catch.
Explain that difference. Catch versus tennis.
Well, think about playing catch. You throw the ball, the other person catches it. There's a pause. They look at the ball, maybe adjust their grip. Then they throw it back.
Okay, yeah. Distinct actions. Pauses in between.
That's the learner dynamic often.
Huh.
They receive the ball, the question. They catch it. They pause, maybe mentally scrambling to form the perfect, grammatically correct response. Then they throw it back, often right back to the same spot where it came from.
Making the other person do all the work of starting the next rally.
Precisely. In learner tennis, you might return the ball, technically. You answer the question,
Right.
but you hit it right back to the other person's baseline. No forward momentum, no angle, no spin.
So the native speaker or the more dominant speaker has to keep serving. New questions, new topics, new energy, just to keep the game going.
Think about the cognitive load. They're essentially carrying the conversation by themselves, which just reinforces their role as the host or teacher and keeps you in the guest or student box.
Okay, so peer tennis is different. It's faster, more agile.
It demands more agility, absolutely. You don't just answer. You're reacting and anticipating almost at the same time. You add spin.
Spin like what? A joke.
Could be. Maybe a witty remark that connects, or a really relevant little anecdote, or maybe a challenging question back up. Polite, but challenging. Or you link what they said to something totally different you both know about.
So you take the initiative. You actually change the direction of the rally.
You change the direction. You show you're an equal partner in keeping this thing moving, not just passively receiving serves. And believe me, the other person feels that shift immediately. They feel you playing the game with them.
Okay, so we need to exchange complex ideas, not just facts.
Yeah.
We need the speed and agility of conversational tennis. What's the system that lets us navigate all this? You called it pragmatic competence.
Yes, and this is huge. It's the secret sauce, really. And it's the area where those C1 certificates often don't quite capture what's needed. Pragmatic competence isn't about knowing the rules of grammar on paper.
It's about how you use it in real life.
Exactly. It's the skill of using language appropriately in different social situations, different cultural contexts, different professional settings. It's all the invisible stuff.
Yeah.
The meaning between the lines.
We should probably dig into this because it sounds like it covers a lot. Things like politeness. How do peers disagree without blowing up the conversation?
Okay, yeah. Politeness theory is definitely relevant here, especially in, say, Western cultures like the US or UK, which tend to be lower context. The ability to soften language is crucial. You need a sort of linguistic buffer.
So instead of just blurting out, that's a terrible idea.
Right. A peer might say something like, okay, I see where you're coming from, but maybe I'm missing something here. I'm just wondering if we've considered the risk of X. Or, correct me if I'm wrong, but could that approach lead to Y? You soften the potential face threat, as linguists call it.
Ah, so you're protecting their face while still getting your point across. It makes it collaborative instead of confrontational.
Precisely. And that ties right into understanding implied meaning. This is like the dark art of conversation, figuring out what isn't being said directly.
Okay, like in a work meeting.
Perfect example. Your colleague presents an idea, maybe it's a bit out there, and the boss listens patiently and says, "That's an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that."
The kiss of death.
For a pragmatically competent peer, yes, they instantly recognize that's likely a polite rejection. They understand the cultural script that avoids direct negativity, especially upwards or sometimes even downwards.
But the learner might hear it interesting and think,
Great. They thought it was interesting. They take it literally. The peer hears the subtext. Nope, not happening, but I'm being diplomatic. That gap in understanding is massive.
it sounds like a minefield. And we haven't even talked about just reading the room, that sort of instant social processing.
Oh, yeah. Knowing when to shift your tone. Knowing when a joke will land versus when it'll bomb. Knowing which topics are okay for this group and which are definitely off limits.
Like you wouldn't make a sarcastic joke during a serious budget cut discussion, usually.
Probably not, unless maybe it's very specific self-deprecating humor that shows shared pain, but even that's risky. A peer senses the energy. They notice the micro-expressions. They understand the underlying context. They know when to be light, when to be serious. If you lack that, even if your grammar is perfect, your contributions can feel off,
Yeah.
jarring, like you're not hearing the music of the conversation.
Which brings us nicely to the fourth piece, letting your authentic personality come through. If you're constantly worried about grammar, you default to safe mode.
Exactly, the dreaded textbook persona. It's polite, often a bit formal, maybe slightly stiff, and frankly, often quite boring.
Because it's not really you.
It's not. It hides the complex, maybe sarcastic or deep thinking or incredibly funny person you actually are in your native language. The listener ends up interacting with this simplified, sanitized version of you.
Whereas the peer, they let the real them show up, even in English.
They do. They get comfortable enough to be sarcastic if that's their style, or passionate, or even a bit stubborn if the topic warrants it, or hilariously self-deprecating. They use the language to express who they are.
They can show anger, frustration, excitement without constantly apologizing for their accent or word choice.
Yes, they're demonstrating they're not just fluent in English, but they're fluent as a complete person who happens to be using English right now. When you bring that full, authentic self to the conversation, something amazing happens.
What's that?
The listener stops listening for mistakes. They start listening for connection, for insight, for humor, for you. They see a whole person, not just a language learner. And that, right there, is the moment you've achieved peer status.
Okay, so we know the goal, connection, reciprocity, being seen as a peer. And we know the linguistic skill is often already there at a high level. So why does this transition often stall? What's blocking the path? It seems like it's often not about the language itself.
That's usually right. These are the invisible barriers, the things that subtly keep even really proficient speakers stuck. And the first one, which can be incredibly frustrating, actually comes from other people. The linguistic charity of native speakers.
Ah, yes. The well-meaning comments that actually hold you back. We've probably all been there.
Totally. It's when people, usually with good intentions, unconsciously patronize you. And it creates this kind of glass ceiling. It's really hard to break through.
The classic example has to be the over-the-top praise for just basic correctness, right?
Oh, absolutely. Wow, your English is so good. What does that really mean? Often it means, wow, I was expecting your English to be much worse, so I'm impressed by the language skill itself.
It's a comment on the language, like you said, not on the brilliant point you just made using the language.
Exactly. When you hear that, you suddenly realize they weren't listening to your idea. They were listening for mistakes, or maybe just listening to the accent. It instantly reframes the interaction.
And it goes beyond just comments, doesn't it? Their behavior changes, too.
It does. They might start simplifying their vocabulary, avoiding idioms you probably understand perfectly well. They might speak a bit slower, enunciate more clearly, even when you've shown you can handle rapid, complex speech.
And crucially, they often avoid challenging you.
Yes. This is huge. In a real peer conversation, if I say something that doesn't quite add up, you should push back, right? You should say, hang on, how does that square with X?
Yeah, you challenge the idea.
But someone offering linguistic charity often avoids that. They're afraid that disagreeing or starting a debate will confuse you or make you feel bad or cause you to lose face, so they keep things easy.
Creating this bubble of safe, superficial conversation.
Exactly. And that prevents you from ever needing to play the real game, the advanced game, where you have to think on your feet, defend your points, maybe use humor or sharp logic under pressure. They're protecting you from the very interactions you need to grow into a peer.
So that external charity can actually reinforce the internal barrier, which is your own student mentality.
We often become our own biggest roadblocks. If people keep treating you like a student, you might start acting like one, even subconsciously, even if your skills are way beyond that.
I definitely recognize that feeling. It comes from years in classrooms, maybe, where getting it right was the main goal, so the fear of making mistakes can be really ingrained.
Deeply ingrained. And the most obvious sign of this student mentality in action is apologizing for mistakes. All the time.
Starting sentences with, sorry for my English, but, or my English isn't perfect, but...
Exactly. What does that do? It immediately frames you as deficient. You're basically asking for a handicap before you've even started playing. You're telling the listener, focus on my language flaws, not my idea. You're reinforcing the very dynamic you want to break free from.
And that fear, that need to apologize, it leads directly to playing it safe, doesn't it?
It really does. We start prioritizing 100% grammatical accuracy over actually expressing the full complexity, the nuance, the realness of what we're thinking.
So you stick to the simple sentences you know are correct, the basic vocabulary you've mastered.
And you sacrifice the depth. You sacrifice the interesting connections. You sacrifice your authentic voice, all for the sake of avoiding a potential preposition error.
We should probably touch on the cognitive load again here.
Yes. When you're intensely focused on self-monitoring, wait, was that the right tense to use the correct there? All that mental energy, it's being stolen from other crucial tasks.
Like what?
Like active listening, like processing what the other person is really saying under the surface, like generating strategic, insightful responses, like being witty or adding that spin we talked about. By playing it safe grammatically, you're hobbling your own intellectual agility in the conversation.
Okay, so we have external charity, internal fear. What's the third big barrier? You mentioned something structural.
Right. That's the cultural script deficit. This is about all the unspoken stuff. Conversations float on this sea of shared cultural knowledge, implicit understandings, common context.
And if you don't have that context?
You can understand every single word being said, but still miss the real meaning, or the humor, or the intention. You hear the words, but you miss the music, the underlying message.
What kind of things fall under this cultural script?
Oh, lots of things. Pop culture references are a big one. If your colleagues are bonding over a line from a classic movie you've never seen or a reference to a current meme.
You're just outside that moment of connection.
Exactly. It's like a little inside joke you weren't invited to. And it's not just trivia. It's also the unspoken social rules. How direct should you be when giving feedback in this particular workplace culture? What are the safe topics for small talk before a meeting starts here? Is sarcastic humor used playfully, or is it seen as aggressive in this group?
And that stuff varies wildly, doesn't it? Between countries, even between different cities or companies.
Hugely. Think about directness. Some cultures value very direct, explicit communication, low context. Get straight to the point. Others rely heavily on indirectness, reading between the lines, high context. If you use a direct style in a high-context environment, you might come across as rude or aggressive, even if you just meant to be efficient.
And vice versa, I suppose.
Oh.
Being too indirect in a direct culture might make you seem evasive or unclear.
Precisely. Missing that script can lead to major misinterpretations. And it also includes things like shared historical and contextual knowledge.
Like local politics or history.
Yeah. Or even just the current mood within a company or a community.
Yeah.
If someone makes an offhand comment referencing, say, a well-known local political blunder from years ago, or uses a metaphor tied to a recent company restructuring.
You might get the literal words.
But you miss the weight of it. The shared eye roll, the knowing chuckle. You lack the context that gives the comment its real punch or its intended warning. If you don't share those scripts, you're always kind of listening from the outside looking in, no matter how perfect your grammar is. It maintains that outsider feeling.
Okay, we've mapped out the territory. We know what peer status looks like, and we know the common roadblocks, the charity, the fear, the cultural gaps. So let's get practical. Let's build the playbook. How do you actually make this transition? Because it sounds like it needs deliberate action.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It requires conscious, tactical shifts, both in what you do and maybe even more importantly, in how you think. And the most fundamental shift, the bedrock, has to be internal. Shift your primary goal
away from
speaking correctly. As we've seen, that goal keeps you trapped in self-monitoring mode, which is cognitively exhausting and hinders real connection.
So what's the new goal?
The new goal needs to be making a connection. Focus on understanding the other person and making yourself understood. Focus on the relationship in that moment, not just the grammatical accuracy.
How does changing that internal goal actually help?
It frees up incredible amounts of mental energy. When you stop obsessively checking your verb tenses, you can actually listen more deeply. You can focus on their message, their tone, their underlying emotions, and that focus on them. It's magnetic. People respond to genuine engagement.
So you're saying, paradoxically, by not focusing obsessively on correctness, you might actually connect better.
Absolutely. Because you're present, you're engaged. You might still make a mistake here and there, sure. But if your primary focus is connection, that mistake becomes less important. It gets absorbed into the flow. People forgive it or ignore it because they're more interested in the interesting thought you just shared or the empathy you just showed. The connection trumps the minor error.
Okay, goal shifted to connection. What's the most powerful tool in our toolkit for actually building that connection in the moment?
Hands down, it's mastering the art of the follow-up question. This is your conversational superpower.
Why is it so powerful?
Because it does so many things at once. It shows you are actually listening. It shows genuine curiosity and investment in what the other person said. And crucially, it shares the burden of keeping the conversation moving.
Instead of just nodding and saying, oh, interesting.
Right. That's
Yeah.
passive.
Mm-hmm.
A good follow-up question is active. It pushes the dialogue forward. Let's take that example again. Someone says they're exhausted from a big project launch.
The learner response might be, oh, I understand. That sounds hard.
Okay, polite, but a peer uses a strategic follow-up. Maybe a logistical one.
Yeah.
Wow, intense. What was the single biggest hurdle you guys had to overcome to get it launched?
Or maybe more about the people.
Yeah, an emotional follow-up. How's the team holding up with all that pressure? Is morale still okay?
Or you could even go bigger picture, connecting back to what we said about ideas.
Exactly. A philosophical follow-up. Working that hard on a deadline like that. Does it ever make you question if that kind of crunch is really sustainable or even necessary in the long run? See, these questions show you're not just processing their words, you're thinking about their reality. You're engaging on a deeper level. You become an equal partner in the exploration, not just a receiver of information.
Okay, follow-up questions are key. What's strategy number 3? You mentioned something tactical.
Yes, this is very practical. Learn to code switch your register. You need to become a bit of a linguistic chameleon, meaning you need to be able to move smoothly between different levels of formality. A peer doesn't just speak formal meeting English all the time. They can shift gears into relaxed, informal social chat when appropriate.
So ditching some of the textbook phrases.
Definitely. Get comfortable with the high-frequency informal stuff. In a casual chat, instead of saying, I concur with your assessment, try, yeah, I totally see what you mean, or,
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense, or even just, absolutely. These signal rapport.
And maybe using more colorful language for emotions.
Yes. Avoid sounding like a clinical report. If something's bad, don't just say, that is an unfortunate circumstance. Go for the emotional connection. Oh, man, that's a tough break, or, what a nightmare. It shows shared feeling. It shows you're embedded in the culture.
What about filler words? Things like and Are those bad?
This is crucial.
Oh.
We need to reframe filler language. We're not talking about paralyzing hesitation. We're talking about the natural lubricants of conversation.
Right.
Like, well, actually, sort of, to be honest. Using these naturally signals that you're thinking in real time, it makes you sound human. If you only speak in perfectly crafted, grammatically flawless sentences with zero fillers, you sound like a robot, or like you rehearsed everything. Peers sound natural, and natural speech has these little pauses and fillers.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. Strategy 4. This one feels more personal. Develop a signature in English.
Yes. This is about reclaiming you. The unique personality you have in your native language are you, the funny one, the deep thinker, the skeptic, the storyteller. That person needs to show up in English too.
You can't leave your personality at the language border.
You can't. If humor is your thing, you need to actively learn and practice the language of humor in English. Maybe it's self-deprecation, maybe it's witty observations, maybe it's sarcasm. Use carefully. If you're more philosophical, master those phrases that let you pivot. That makes me think about, but isn't the bigger question here?
So it's not just learning vocabulary, it's learning the patterns, the rhythm of how you express your specific style.
Exactly. Think about storytelling. It's not just the words, it's the timing, the pause for effect, the buildup. When you successfully import your authentic way of being into English, people finally see the real you. Your contribution becomes unique, valuable, because nobody else brings your particular blend of insight, humor, or perspective.
Okay, final strategy. This one sounds proactive. Proactively break the linguistic charity cycle.
Yes. You can't just wait for people to stop patronizing you. You need to actively signal that you're ready for and expect a higher level of engagement.
How do you do that without sounding rude, especially with the praise thing?
It's delicate, but doable. When someone says, wow, your English is great, acknowledge it briefly, politely, thanks, I appreciate that. But then immediately redirect the focus back to the substance. But I'm actually really interested in what you think about whatever the topic was. Or, thanks, but did my point about the budget make sense?
Yeah.
You gently but firmly steer the conversation back to ideas, not language mechanics.
Asserting that the content is primary. What about inviting challenge? That sounds scary.
It can be. But it's powerful. Stop trying to avoid disagreement. Actually invite challenge. Say things like, I know my perspective on this might be different because of my background. I'd genuinely be curious to hear where you disagree or if you see any flaws in my thinking.
Wow. That takes confidence.
It does. But it signals massive confidence. It says, I value truth over ego. Let's spar intellectually. That request for constructive criticism is maybe the ultimate marker of a peer. You're saying, treat me like an equal thinker.
And the last part of breaking the cycle? Taking a risk?
Yes, the calculated risk.
Attempting idioms and more complex language. Even if you're only 80% sure you're using that idiom correctly, go for it sometimes.
What if you mess it up?
So what? Best case, you nail it and sound incredibly fluent and embedded. Worst case, you mess it up slightly, maybe there's a shared chuckle, someone gently corrects you, and you've created a moment of connection and vulnerability. That shared laugh over a minor language fumble builds far more rapport than playing it safe with perfect but boring sentences ever could. It shows you're playing at their level, even if you occasionally miss the ball.
Okay, so these strategies, they can sound a bit abstract, right? Until you see them in action. We've got 4 really great specific examples of people who consciously used tactics like these to break through and claim their peer status.
Real stories make it concrete. Let's start with Anya, the UX designer from Poland. You mentioned she was brilliant, technically, working in a London tech firm.
Right. Top-notch coder, could give perfect presentations. But in those fast, messy team meetings where her colleagues were having these rapid-fire debates about design, lots of banter, quick challenges, inside jokes, she felt stuck on the sidelines, like an observer, just waiting for a polite gap to deliver her information.
Her problem sounds like that conversational tennis seed, and maybe the fear of interrupting.
Exactly. The pace was too fast, and the learner instinct screams, don't interrupt, wait your turn. But in that kind of dynamic environment, if you wait for a polite pause,
It never comes.
it never comes.
Yeah.
So her strategy was quite specific. She needed to find a way to jump in, but do it effectively. She prepared a specific tool, a softening phrase, combined with the relevant common idiom.
Okay, set the scene. What was the debate?
They were arguing intensely about redesigning a major part of the user interface, getting really heated. Anya realized they were essentially arguing about creating something complex that actually a simpler existing solution could handle. She saw her moment.
And she deployed the tool.
She leaned in slightly, raised her voice just enough to cut through the back and forth, but kept her tone polite.
Sorry, if I can just jump in for a second here. That's the softener. Before we go too far down this path, I'm just a bit worried that if we follow Sarah's proposal, we might just be reinventing the wheel. Boom, the idiom.
Reinventing the wheel. Simple, common, but perfectly placed. What happened? Did they say, oh, Anya, your English is good?
Not at all. The reaction was immediate and profound. The debate just stopped. Everyone looked at her, not with annoyance, but with attention. The team lead didn't comment on her language. He said, hang on, Anya's got a point. Anya, talk us through the existing solution you're thinking of.
So they didn't just acknowledge her input, they deferred to her expertise. Instantly. The language she used became completely irrelevant in that moment because she used it strategically, as a tool to solve the business problem. She wasn't the Polish designer who speaks good English anymore. She was the sharp colleague who just saved them a ton of wasted effort. Peer status, claimed.
That's powerful. Okay, example 2. Kenji, the academic from Japan. Brilliant scientist, C2 level English, great at presenting research, but struggled socially at conferences.
Yeah, the classic coffee break scenario. He could deliver a complex lecture, but then during the informal breaks, he'd see these little groups of senior professors laughing, chatting easily, and he just couldn't figure out how to break in. He felt isolated.
So his gap was the informal social register, the cultural scripts for that specific environment?
Exactly. He'd mastered formal academic English, but had almost zero peer competence in the casual social side of his field. His strategy had to be about bridging that gap. He decided to prepare, meticulously, some social English.
What did that involve? Studying jokes?
Kind of. He researched lighthearted, current topics that might resonate. Things outside pure science. He picked up on some chatter about a popular British TV show, The Crown, and also the perennial academic complaint, budget cuts. He found a way to link them.
Okay, how did he use it?
He saw a group, including a very senior professor, lamenting their latest grant application struggles. He approached, waited for a slight lull, and said, with a bit of a self-deprecating smile, listening to all this, I'm starting to think our funding proposals must look nearly as dramatic and full of intrigue as Prince Andrew trying to explain himself on the crown.
Okay. Pop culture reference, shared pain, funding cuts, humor, a touch of self-deprecation. How did it land?
It landed perfectly. They didn't just politely nod, they burst out laughing. Real laughter. The senior professor immediately turned, clapped him on the shoulder, and introduced him around. You have to meet Kenji. He just perfectly captured the absurdity of our budget situation.
So the conversation shifted.
Instantly. It went from TV analogy to shared institutional woes and then, naturally, back to their actual scientific work. But now Kenji was in the circle. He wasn't the quiet researcher from Japan anymore. He was Kenji, the guy who made that funny spot-on comparison. He used a shared cultural touchstone outside his expertise to gain access within his field.
Clever. Okay, third case. Chloe, the lawyer from France. She was in a tough negotiation with American lawyers who were using very aggressive, idiomatic language.
Yes, they were hitting her with things like, we need to bite the bullet, stop beating around the bush, let's draw a line in the sand. It felt like a deliberate tactic to put her off balance, make her feel less fluent, less confident.
So her challenge was handling that linguistic aggression. Her instinct might have been to retreat to safer, more formal language.
That was exactly her instinct, and it was making her look weak, indecisive. She realized she couldn't win by retreating. Her strategy had to be to meet them on their own linguistic battlefield, to fight fire with fire, using powerful peer idioms herself to signal she wouldn't be intimidated.
So what happened in the negotiation?
The American lead was pushing hard, trying to rush a decision. He says something like, look, Chloe, we've been discussing this for hours. We need a firm commitment today. Time to bite the bullet.
And instead of saying, I require additional time for consideration,
she didn't retreat. She looked him straight in the eye and countered, matching his directness but using her own strategic idioms. I understand the desire for speed. However, as we both know, in complex deals like this, the devil is in the details. We can't afford to rush and risk problems down the line. Let's not waste more time on hypotheticals. Let's get down to brass tacks and resolve the specific issues in Clause 5 right now.
Wow. Devil's in the details. Get down to brass tacks. Strong, assertive, using their kind of language. What was the reaction?
It completely changed the energy in the room. The lead American lawyer actually paused, leaned back slightly, and gave her this look of respect. And he said, all right, Chloe, you play hardball. Point taken.
He acknowledged her strength.
He acknowledged her as an equal, a tough negotiator. The dynamic shifted instantly from them trying to patronize her to a state of respectful adversaries. She used their own linguistic weapons not just to defend, but to command respect, peer to peer.
That's impressive. Okay, final story. Diego, the musician from Argentina in Austin, Texas. Great musician, fluent in music theory talk, but struggled with the social side with local players.
Right. He could talk scales and modes all day long in technically perfect English. But the casual chat before or after a jam session, it felt awkward, sterile, just polite questions, no real connection.
His problem was bringing his signature self into English, the passionate guitar nerd he was in Spanish.
Exactly. In Argentina, he was that guy, super passionate, opinionated, full of obscure references. In Austin, he felt he had to tone it all down just to be understood, and it made him seem bland. He realized his passion and specialized knowledge needed to be his social currency, not his formal English.
So what was his strategy? Stop trying to be polite and just nerd out.
Pretty much. Use the local slang, the specific references that showed genuine, deep enthusiasm, not just technical appreciation. So after a local guitarist played this amazing, intricate solo.
Diego didn't say your technique was highly proficient.
No. He leaned in, full of energy, and used the local vibe. Ooh, man, that was dirty. Seriously, I loved that. It totally reminded me of some of that really raw stuff Stevie Ray Vaughan used to do, like late nights at Antone's back in the day.
Ah, the slang, dirty, the iconic local venue, Antone's, the legendary local hero, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and even specific knowledge, late-night sets implying deeper cuts.
Exactly. He wasn't just complimenting. He was sharing deep, specialized passion using the local code. And the effect was immediate.
What did the other guitarist say?
His eyes lit up. He instantly replied, oh yeah, you know that 88 bootleg where he completely messes up the intro to Pride and Joy, but then recovers with that insane riff?
They were instantly speaking the same language, the real language.
The language of shared obsession. The conversation just took off messy, fast, full of jargon and shared references, but completely real. Diego wasn't the musician from Argentina anymore. He was just another guitar nerd, one of the guys. He used his authentic passion, expressed in their shared code, to finally connect as a peer. Itro.
So when you pull all these stories and strategies together, what's the big takeaway? this whole journey from being that advanced student to really becoming a conversational peer, it seems it's less about getting every single grammar point perfect.
Much less.
And much more about claiming an identity. It's something you do proactively. It's not a status someone else just decides to grant you once your accent is gone.
That's really the heart of it, isn't it? You have to take the reins. You have to demonstrate through how you engage, through the risks you take, that your ideas, your personality, your contributions are valuable now, regardless of the linguistic package they arrive in.
So fluency at this highest level,
Right.
it's really about presence, being fully present in the conversation.
Presence, not perfection. That's the mantra. It definitely requires confidence, yes. But it also requires that internal shift we talked about, focusing on connection over correction. And it requires having a strategy, like the ones we discussed, to actively change how others perceive and interact with you.
So the call to action is, what? Stop apologizing.
Stop apologizing for your English. Start contributing. Start trusting that what you have to say matters.
Yes.
Trust that your unique perspective, your humor, your insights are needed in the conversation, even if they come with an accent.
You're not a temporary guest anymore needing special treatment. You've earned your seat. You've pulled up a chair to the table. You've made yourself at home in the English language. It's your space, too, now.
Absolutely. And maybe that leads us to the final thought, the question we want to leave you, the listener, with as you move forward on this journey. If you really embrace this idea, if the English language itself starts to become transparent for you, just the vehicle, and you finally give yourself permission to stop playing it safe, what part of your true personality, maybe something tied to your cultural background, that you've been holding back? Is it the sarcasm, the stubbornness, the philosophical musings? What part of you will you finally let out?
And what kind of conversation will that unlock?
Exactly. What new, maybe more challenging, more interesting conversation will you decide to start tomorrow, now that you're not just a learner, but a peer? Go find out.